Transforming your life through hypnotherapy has never been easier. With the help of your host, Julie from coachinghypnosis.net, and these power-packed minisodes, you're sure to find yourself engaging in more positive behaviors around both your physical and mental health. Here's your host, Julie.
G'day, it's Julie from coachinghypnosis.net, and you deserve to know the tremendous way hypnotherapy can reduce overthinking, because people have had enough of thinking too much and trying to be thoughtful at the same time. And I'm not a therapist or psychotherapist, but this is my 10th year as a clinical hypnotherapist in strategic psychotherapy. I currently help my clients online. They change their life without changing out of their pajamas. And I could only imagine someone like you likes precision, consideration, and you are conscientious about your life. And you deserve to know how to get rid of those annoying thoughts. Or maybe you have a talent for woeful thoughts. Like you question if you have heart palpitations, you're unsure if you should take a COVID test, or if you've ever thought about having children and your first thoughts are of labor pains, complications, blood tests, nausea, fatigue, which all result in sleepless nights. Long-term excessive overthinking can increase your risk factor for depression and anxiety. Hypnosis and mindfulness offer new ways of getting those wanted self-regulation skills. And the law of magnetism can help you literally line up your life. And when it comes to the mind, it can be easy to get lost in a sea of thoughts. Some might call it overthinking, and others might refer to it as being thoughtful. But what's the difference between the two, and how can hypnotherapy help you? First, let's define overthinking. As you know, overthinking is when our thoughts spiral out of control, leading to unnecessary stress and anxiety. It's like being stuck on a never-ending loop of what-ifs and should-haves. It's like having a monkey mind that won't shut up, even when you're trying to relax or fall asleep. And as you know, being thoughtful is a more positive state of mind. The formal word for overthinking is rumination, and rumination is the spinning of thoughts over and over again. It's not progressive, it's repetitive. And worse, rumination can have you eating too much, taking drugs, and drinking too much, and all of that stuff can take you away from proper problem solving. Lots of therapists prescribe the right homework and encourage journaling, but if you're a ruminator, it can lead you to making the problem worse. Rumination can increase your vulnerability to higher levels of depressive symptoms over time. After accounting for baseline levels, depressive disorders, including onsets, chronicity of depressive disorders and anxiety symptoms. Ruminators typically believe they're gaining insight through it and often have a history of trauma, can perceive they face chronic, uncontrollable stresses, or exhibit personality characteristics such as perfectionism and excessive relational focus. How to recover from excessive rumination? The therapies with the greatest empirical support all emphasize action in treatment. Clients may feel better in merely supportive therapy, talking stuff through, but they do better in active treatment with direction. Hypnosis and mindfulness can assist with increased impulse control, increased frustration tolerance, greater internal locus of control, greater empathy, social attunement, greater self-awareness and self-acceptance, greater emotional self-regulation and coping skills. When it comes to goals, just like hashtags, a hypnotherapist can sow the seeds of hashtags to maximize the client's goals. Ideally, you want to trigger a transdiverational search, and this phenomena, transdiverational with a marvelous phonological ambiguity, refers to the process which the listener begins to make meaning from the hearing of the surface structure and recovering its associated deep structure. I can use a combination of referential index and attach a missing noun phrase to trigger a transdiverational search. I can be unclear what I'm talking about by using or leaving out nouns to help the client visualize their goals or feel them or hear them. For example, people can be comfortable while visualizing their goals, listeners. People can be comfortable. People can be comfortable. People can, listeners, be comfortable while visualizing their goals. People can be comfortable, listeners, while visualizing their goals. The overall effect is known as maximal direction. The set of unconscious messages reinforce one another to proceed in an increasingly meaningful direction towards a desired goal. Then I can use higher level patterning. Let's call it #patterning to unite the dominant and non-dominant hemispheres. And that football, the weight of the hands and the feet, weight of problems, weight of table, and that hat stand, the records of many patients, the phenomena of life, of illness, of emotion, of physical, mental behavior, the restfulness of relaxation, the need to attend to one's needs, the need to attend to one's tension, while looking at the football or table or the hat stand, the comfort of withdrawal from the environment, fatigue, and its development, the unchanging character of the football, the monotony of the table, the need to take a rest, the comfort of closing one's eyes, the relaxation sensation of a deep breath, the delight of learning passively, the capacity for intellectual learning by the unconscious. And all of those interjections are merely supplementary to the patient's own train of thought and utterances. Clearly, the medical practitioner will have a different purpose in mind than the coach, who will have a different goal than the dental practitioner, and so on. This interspersing of therapeutic suggestions among the suggestions often helps a client stay in trance for longer, and the therapeutic suggestions become more effective. The patient not only hears them, but understands them and attaches meaning to them. And I can only imagine someone like you who wants to line up your life, set yourself up to win, step up to your intense focus. And the law of mental magnetism tells us iron can be magnetized because all of the molecules line up and face the same direction. They push and pull together. Most metals don't have that molecular ability. They don't line up. They're not focused. They push and pull in all different directions and consequently are powerless. They have no magnetic force. When you concentrate and focus with incredible intention, you literally generate a mental magnetic force. When you line up your thinking to focus your goals, you create the results of your desire. For example, soldiers who knew that the end of a long march was in sight had far less prolactin and hydrocortisone hormones released in response to stress and anxiety than did a group of soldiers who didn't know how much further they would have to hike. As you know, overthinking isn't great, but not thinking is probably worse. You do need thoughts in your head. If not, you could end up just like that guy that thought it was a great idea to watch the Korean War games up close on a surfboard. Or you could end up that flatmate. While you're on a Zoom meeting, the flatmate is walking around in the background naked, and all of your staff have to tell you your flatmate's naked in the background. And that actually happened to a woman I once worked with. Self-awareness isn't pop psychology. Imagine having children with a partner who doesn't have the temperament to be an effective parent. Here is the one way to be thoughtful with a side of laughter. A meditation script titled Knock on the Sky and Listen to the Sound by Robert Rabin. The monk spoke about mindfulness, about awareness, about respect for each other and all living things. He spoke slowly and quietly from time to time. He would fall silent, the woman would pick up and ring a bell that rested on the floor in front of her. The vibrations of the bell could be heard throughout the auditorium and felt with each person's brain, stimulating perception of intuitive subtlety. The talk was less about information than experience. The words were like a tour bus carrying the audience to ancient sites of meaning and depth and beauty. Through the bus was still unmoving. We travelled far and we saw much. After time, I felt the audience breathe in unison and meditative breathing, a breathing that connected us together and the awareness of which the monk was speaking. I thought I was sitting in the mountains at twilight, and when life itself begins to creep from its hiding places, like a deer come to drink from a lake of pentagrams and stars. Even when speaking, the monk was silent, in order to hear his words of silence and the silence within his words. The audience had to be silent and become silence. It was a spectacle. We were all embraced by silence and thus set free from agitation, separation, from duality. It would have been impossible for any anger or cruelty to arise in that community. It would have been impossible for anyone to harm another in any way. We were transported to reality. Silence cannot be explained. It cannot be known or experienced in a way that might be familiar to us, as we use to experience other events in our life. However, when we say beauty or love, and when we are meeting those two in pure and honest place, then we can say that silence has come into our life. We can only use words to point in the direction of silence, such that if one actually goes into the distance towards the word's point, one will actually come upon silence as a fact. When silence is beheld as a fact, all speculation, argument, and belief about that which the word silence refers ends instantly forever. Silence is that in which everything exists, from which everything comes, into which everything returns. It is unutterable context in which the cosmos occurs, a playground of pure consciousness. Silence is oneness. Silence refers to the state of fundamental unified existence, a condition of being in which all conflict, fear, doubt, projection, memory, delusions, all subjectivity and objectivity are dissolved and thus resolved. Silence is an instantaneous recognition that which is without time unconditioned because by cause and effect. If one were a religious person, one could say that silence is the soul of God, or perhaps the God of God. If this sounds abstract, vague, esoteric, it only sounds so because we cannot say exactly what silence is. Some things are so beyond the reach of words and metaphors, symbols and images, beliefs and concepts that all attempts to describe them are foolish. And yet even as we speak foolishly and impertinently of that which cannot be said, something within us will smile knowingly. It is this intuitive resonance which words can stimulate. This is the direction that we can point to and go toward, walking or running in order the recognition of wordless to become real. But even as silence becomes indomitably real, as taunt and tense and thrilling as a tidal wave crushing upon us, crushing us beyond recognition even as this happens, we cannot speak its truth. Any discipline practice that involves focusing the mind will eventually lead to silence. Spiritual methods such as meditation techniques, chanting mantras, yoga, tai chi, all of these will lead to silence. Self-inquiry will lead to silence, and so will martial arts, dance and art. So will rock climbing and skydiving. So will cooking and eating. So will playing and loving. Everything will lead to silence because silence is a life force behind everything. It is the oxygen without which everything would fall over dead, flash frozen. Since all things lead to silence, we must follow the echoes of silence inward to the source of all things within us. Being led to the silence might imply the silence is somewhere else. This is only a figure of speech. Silence is always the first thing and the last thing. It is always present, but very subtle. So we must therefore learn to recognize it. The direction of the silence is any direction. There's no place that silence is not. Although we cannot apprehend it with our senses or with our minds, still let me suggest a foolproof way of coming into silence quickly so that silence becomes a fact for us. First, we must develop the ability to distinguish one thought from the other. When we can do this, we must then develop the ability to see clearly the space between two thoughts. Then that space becomes large and stable enough for us to drive a truck through it. We will know silence is a fact. It is the very center of universal manifestation. One finds swirling gusts of silence, vast galactic streamers, millions of light years along. If we try to understand this silence, our mind will never understand it. Silence is realized in a moment of communion, in a moment of losing our separation from life. The underlying truth of existence is silence. Silence embraces everything, and we cannot be known because to know silence we would have to be separate from silence, and silence would then be an object of our perception and of our knowing. Silence refers to that which is beyond dualism of knower and known. Silence becomes a fact when we in life become an inseparable whole, even though we're trying to define it. No definition of silence is accurate. We don't want to think that by defying it, we can know it. Silence is knowable only itself, and we come into knowing through an alchemy of self-transcendence. We can only create a definition that points to silence. The truth of reality is silent. It is undisturbed. It is causeless. It is out of time, out of space, non-dual. Silence is the preeminent nothingness in which the universe dances in a spectacular and mysterious way. Intuition is not a tool, but rather an intelligence that uses us. We might not see this right away. Intuition is willing to be used, but only for a time. One day it will require that we suspend our goals and objectives, our plans and aspirations for fuller recognition of what intuition is, what it represents. We will come to see that intuition is the ambassador of silence. We must serve that silence, for it is the soul of our world. So what if you thought about hypnotherapy and overthinking differently? And what if you didn't? The choice is yours.